LinkedIn presents.
What if we could build workplaces that function better for all different kinds of brains? I'm Morra Aarons-Mele, and this is The Anxious Achiever, the show that looks at the intersection of mental health and work and asks, how can we do both better?
Hi, I'm Jonathan Fields. Tune into my podcast for conversations about the sweet spot between work, meaning, and joy, and also listen to other people's questions about how to get the most out of that thing we call work. Check out Sparked wherever you enjoy podcasts.
Did you know that small and medium businesses make up 98% of the global economy, but most B2B marketers still treat them as a one-size-fits-all? LinkedIn's Meet the SMB report reveals why that's a missed opportunity and how you can reach these fast-moving decision makers effectively. Learn more at linkedin.com/meet-the-SMB.
The last few years have brought to light just how many people are neurodivergent, who live on that spectrum, and what their symptoms look like. And because it is a spectrum, we are all neurodiverse. And so it's so important for leaders and workplaces to really understand everything that comes with having a different kind of brain, and how we can all think about building better organizations with these realities in mind. I'll never forget, I was at a conference once, and it was all about building programs for people who are neurodivergent. And someone stood up and said, "We're already here. We're your colleagues. We're working with you every single day." I wanted to know what the research says about real things companies can do. And so I reached out to Ludmila Praslova. She is a professor of psychology and business at Vanguard University of Southern California. And she wrote the book, The Canary Code, a guide to neurodiversity, dignity, and intersectional belonging at work. Today, we share practical advice for how workplaces can do better. Here's our conversation. Ludmila, one of the things that I'm struggling with a little bit, and I noticed that in the opening to your book, The Canary Code, you opened with how you had sort of changed the title at the last minute based on feedback from the community. And I wanted to sort of open here with a topic that I think is also another hot button issue in the community, and then maybe use it to go into the conversation about strengths. How does that sound?
Absolutely.
So superpowers, the idea of having, for example, autism superpowers, I know has detractors in the community and proponents. And it is controversial. I myself, speaking of writing a book, I'm just about to start writing a book, and I'm struggling with this too. I wanted to talk about where you stand on it. But first, I wanted to share just a couple data points from a survey that I'm doing right now.
I saw it. It's a wonderful survey.
Thank you. Thank you. So I am surveying people like us. Now, this is not a scientific survey. It's not administered by a third party. It's just people who choose to participate, who identify as neurodistinct, neurodivergent, have a mental illness, a learning difference, etc. And I've asked them, and there's over 1,200 answers right now, a couple questions about how they think about their brain and their career. And 93% of them say, my brain, my whoever I am has impacted my career. 90% say they think that it's given them special skills. About 85% of them at this point say they think they have superpowers. They also say, I don't know if my diagnosis has been a net positive or a net negative for my career. It's complex. But I wanted to just frame that up because I think that this issue is very complex.
It absolutely is. And I think the problem we have in the community is because people are trying to force a simple answer on a complex issue and the same answer to all kinds of different people in different circumstances. So that's what doesn't work. I wrote something for Psychology Today on that topic a while back. There is definitely a lot of push for superpowers and against superpowers. Where I think we have an issue is saying, I have superpowers, or telling, parents sometimes tell their children this is your superpower. That's one thing. But telling complete strangers that, your ADHD is your superpower, or saying that the entire group has a superpower. That's where we have an issue. Because let's say I have a superpower. I can say I have a superpower. I have a really good memory. Okay, wonderful. You know what else really good memory does? You can't forget all the trauma and all the bullying you experience. And there are things you really, really, really would rather forget. So it's a superpower in some ways. Yes, it does help, with academics, but it does not help with your mental health whatsoever when your brain keeps bringing up all the horrible things people told you, for decades. So it's very complicated. And the same thing can be superpower neutral or a bad thing. So let's say sensory sensitivities, right? So really good hearing runs in my family. My grandmother could hear everything at the long distance. I can hear everything at the long distance. Probably not a problem when you have a big house and no connected walls and your family respects you. That's not the case for many people. Let's say you live in a one-bedroom apartment with 4 people, like I grew up. It's constant hell because you can't turn it off, and it's complete nightmare. So anything could be a good thing, a bad thing, or a neutral thing, depending on the circumstances and on where you are in life. So that's, I think, why we have a problem. It's not a bad thing to say that you have superpowers, and it's not a bad thing to say that some neurodivergent people experience their differences as superpowers. What becomes a problem is saying that all neurodivergent people have superpowers,
Right.
or that particular characteristics are always superpowers, like honesty. So many autistic people are very honest. You would think it's a good thing, right? And theoretically, it should help our organizations when we tell the truth. But what happens in reality is that we get pounded for being honest, and we get bullied for being honest.
I live with someone like that. I totally understand. Our society is not honest.
Yes.
It's so complex. I mean, I'm sort of the mindset, and our friend Sonia and Shang, I think, would agree. Most people have a superpower, right? We as
Yes.
humans, we have superpowers. And it's really those of us who are lucky who get to find a work life where we get to apply our superpowers, right? Like that's the win. So
Absolutely.
many of us never find that, neurodivergent or not. I think probably more neurodivergent people don't find it.
And don't have opportunities to even explore, because we know it's harder to get internships when you're neurodivergent. It's definitely hard to even get your first job on the first step of the ladder. And it's hard to work yourself into the situation where you can use your superpowers.
You didn't know that you had autism until pretty late in your life, right?
Late 40s, yes.
Late 40s. Looking back, what do you think would have been different for you if you had known when you were 15 years old? Like today, you probably would have known much earlier.
Again, it depends. If I were growing up now with the kind of awareness there is in society and with a better parental awareness, it depends on what your parents decide to do about it. It would have been probably different. So if I had parents who said, okay, we're just going to adjust the traditional ideas about parenting, and we'll just be flexible and try to develop your strength. That's one thing. But there is also a type of parents who will say, we're going to make sure you're like everybody else. And then people can be also put through very traumatic interventions. And in my case, obviously, at the time and at the place, my parents wouldn't have known what to do. And they probably would have also tried to like approach it as a horrible thing that needs to be corrected with intervention, which I
Mm,
don't know if it would have been a very good thing.
yeah.
Or they might have been super overprotective. So I would have never tried things that I've done. In general, just I did a lot of trial and error, but I never thought that like I can't do something. So I just did it. And even if it wasn't the easiest thing, I'm glad I did it. I think I would have liked to found out in my late 20s, I think, because that's like when I was in graduate school, and that's the first time people said that, okay, you just have really severe depression. And I wasn't. I was just having an autistic burnout. And I think if I knew at least then, it would have helped a lot. I don't know in my case if it would have been helpful to know like in the childhood, but it would have been helpful to know earlier.
As an earlier career adult, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I wanna talk about strengths.
Yes.
And one of the things that you mention in your book, and I don't have the exact statistic, is that most of us have an equation at work where it's like 30% strengths, 30% like, "Meh, we're okay," and
Mhm.
30% like, "Oh, we're terrible at this. We're never gonna be good at this."
Yes.
And you posit, what would work look like if we worked 66%
Exactly.
to our strengths? Why is this important for people like us? I mean, I think it's important for everyone, which is one of your points, but like especially for people like us.
It is important for everyone because we all have strengths and weaknesses. But for neurodivergent people, what's very typical is a spiky profile of abilities. So the typical profile could be your B plus student. Someone can do a lot of things more or less well. Many neurodivergent people would be like your A plus C minus student. They're really, really good at some things and really, really, really not good at other things. So for other people, something might be like, I can do this. It's not fantastic. For us, if we're really, really good at something, we're way more productive than the average person. And if we're doing that something that doesn't align with their strength, it's completely horrible. So the difference, the magnitude of the difference between our strength and our areas that are not that great is higher. So the ROI for us, if we're mostly getting to work with those A plus areas, for us and for our organizations, ROI is so much better than when they're trying to use us in our C minus areas.
I have a slide in my upcoming South by Southwest presentation that says, be boldly bad at things. And I find with people like us, there's this that we're spiky. I love spiky, but our motivation kicks in ways that might be different for someone with a different profile. And so when we are doing something we are good at and we're motivated, we're unstoppable. I think of a gentleman I interviewed, Ennis Olson, and he has, I guess, ADHD, you would call it. He's on the
Mhm.
spectrum and has ADHD. And, for years he struggled because he'd be like, oh man, like some Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, I just couldn't get any work done. I would sit in the office and I'd be like, "Ugh." But then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was on fire, man. I could do everything. And I just was like on it, right? That hyper focus. And at some point, and he got senior enough, he was like, you know what? This is how I work. Like,
Mhm.
I'm going to be an incredible guy Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And maybe Monday, Tuesday, I won't be on my A game and I'm going to stop feeling bad about that.
That's fantastic. And yes, so many of us have interest-based brain. We really, really
Mm.
get turned on when we like something. And when we're working on areas of passion and we're in that hyper focus, it's definitely an incredible performance. And that's one thing that many organizations have an issue with. They would rather just kind of have someone slogging through things at okayish pace than okay, there's an amazing performance. And I talk about it a little bit in my book, and there's actually not everything even made in my book on that topic. But again, sometimes if you're self-employed, for example, or if you're in a higher level position, it's a little bit easier to manage this. Or if you're in a professional role where you have a lot of autonomy. But if not, and if people are trying to manage you, a couple of things can happen. Sometimes you're just not even hired because they would rather have, that steady drip of productivity than your hyper focus achievements. And in other situations, what happens is people try to force you to constantly work at that intensity. And they're like, well, you could do it on Thursday, so you have to do it Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday again. And that, of course, will push you into burnout because the productivity also comes because we're burning so much of ourselves. Even if we are enjoying it ourselves in the hyper focus, there is still a time that needs to be balanced with a downtime. And when you are on this do like everyone else schedule, or people say, well, you performed a miracle last Thursday and I want you to perform a miracle every day. That, I think, is one of the many reasons why we know specifically statistics for autistic people and autistic burnout, but I'm sure it also occurs across various neurodivergent types and variations. And that's might be one of the reasons that we tend to burn out. Again, I actually wrote a whole chapter on it. It just didn't make it into the book.
Oh, I would love to read it. I mean, I think that this is, I think sort of it's the quest to find the right fit. You call us square pegs. The quest to find the right fit where I can work, in that 2/3 of my strengths zone, not just for neurodivergent people, for most of us, is really hard. And it's not, I mean, one of the things I love about your work, and I know to be true, is it's not just about the tasks you're doing and what you're doing. It's about what your office feels like, what your management feels like. Are you in the quiet? Is it loud? Is it bright? It's really also about like, where am I and what does my environment feel like that keeps me in that productivity, right?
Yes, we all need different environments. There is so much research that shows that, let's say, introverts and extroverts, if you put an introvert into the extrovert preferred situation, it's very hard to perform. It's also true on the other side. So people have different needs and different requirements for maximum productivity. But what happens is that usually the people who are the loudest get their way. So then environment is organized for people who are the loudest, and sometimes really for not anybody, just for people who will never work in that environment. It just gets designed by somebody not even thinking about people who are going to work there. That is absolutely an issue because when our sensory being is, let's say, overstimulated. There are issues also when people are understimulated. But when our sensory being is overstimulated, we're not going to perform at our best. It's literally not possible to override the biological signals. And when your brain is trying to just keep up and not crash, it is not going to be able to give the best productivity. So it's really all of it. It's time of the day. For some people, it's time of the day, especially. For other people, it's sensory environment. And again, it shouldn't be hard now because people should be able to listen to the music in their ears and without disturbing anyone. And other people should be able to enjoy quiet without, anyone having an issue with it. But somehow there's this idea that everyone should be the same and we all should just say, yeah, we love this environment someone else created for us. And somehow people are taking it as a personal insult if someone says, what's been designed is not working for me. But it's really not personal. It's people trying to function and perform their best. And people are trying to work the way that works for them. So it's a productivity issue. And for some reason, people just keep thinking about you're just being high maintenance and being unreasonable when people are asking for either, more light, less light, more noise, less noise, warmer temperature, colder temperature. And we're just somehow expected to adjust to someone else's specifications. And there are some circumstances when it's, there's not much you can do. But in most modern jobs, in most knowledge jobs, but not even just knowledge jobs, we theoretically can have all kinds of control over our environment.
I had the opportunity to tour the new Deloitte headquarters in Boston, and they have a whole sensory wing. It's unbelievable. It's padded like my podcast studio, and it's
Wow.
natural light, and it's quiet, and it's calming, and there are rooms you can go into when you just need some space. There are rooms you can go into when you have a telehealth appointment.
Wow.
There are plants. It's truly remarkable, and it was really busy when I was touring,
Yes, because
you
not
know?
only some people like it, many people like that environment. So why just not make our offices better for everyone?
It's like the quiet car on the Amtrak. I used to take the Amtrak up
Hmm.
from Boston and New York and DC, like, every week, and it was I had to be in the quiet car. I could not
Yeah.
sit with 5 hours of noise. I wanna talk about just looping back to strengths for a minute. I would imagine a lot of my listeners are great. Yeah, strengths. How do I find the role that allows me to work this way? Do you have any tips or even ways to start identifying when you're in your strength zone and when you're not?
Yes, it's definitely a little bit of a journey, but sometimes we do have the gut feeling of, you are in your strength zone or not. There's really no way to do it just by reading something. And there are several levels. So first you need to have occupational match. So you need to be generally in one of the fields, maybe not like the one and only field where you can do well, but in general, the kind of field that is going to work for you. And then from there, there's a specific match with a specific role and a set of tasks. And then there's also organizational match and whether the particular environment, the manager, the culture are going to work for you. So let's say your parents force you into medicine and it's just not what you want to do. You might want to just kind of say, okay, so maybe within medicine, I need to find something a little bit different. Maybe I'm a creative and I just like designing things. So maybe you can just take your medical knowledge, but add this creative aspect rather than something that is not working for you.
That
So,
literally happened to my business partner, Christine
oh,
Coe.
wow.
She was a PhD in neuroscience, and she's a brilliantly creative and social person. And one day she was doing her fellowship at Harvard Medical School, and she's in the lab all by herself, surrounded by textbooks and quiet. And she says she looks at those books and she thinks, I cannot do this the rest of my life. This is not who I am. And she had made it
Mhm.
so far. She had made it to Harvard Medical School.
Wow.
But it was just not who she was.
And that's very hard. Yes. Well, I'm glad she was able to pivot the way she did because, yes, the earlier we discover the occupational match, the easier it is for us then to just focus on specific tasks or specific jobs and specific environments.
Yeah.
So if we have a generally good occupational match, we don't need to study for the whole other career. We need to focus then on specific jobs and even how they're advertised and the environment within jobs. And it is very hard because it's very hard to figure out what the job actually is from the posting because very often it's very generic and it's cut and paste and they want everything. They want someone to answer phones and do statistics. It doesn't make any sense, but they just want it all. So sometimes you just want to explore a little bit more, maybe talk to people who are already there. Check Glassdoor see like how truthful this company is in the eyes of people who actually work there. So you can get a little bit better idea. Most organizations, if they wanted to hire people that will stay and be happy, should really do realistic job preview and be very honest when they're hiring. It doesn't always happen, unfortunately. So sometimes you have to do a little bit more investigation to know if that specific role is going to fit you. So if you have pretty good match to your occupation and then to specific role within it, another point is you can have the same job title, and even be in the same organization, but you have a different manager, and you can have wonderful experience, and you can have an absolutely heartbreaking, horrible experience that will make you sick. So that's another part, who you're working with and how much understanding this person is going to have about, in general, good management practices, how to work with people like you and how to work with people who are different from that person. So that's another big issue. And sometimes we can also, let's say we have a manager who is generally understanding, and we have a company that's generally flexible. We could job craft to make our fit even better. If we are generally in the right area and in okayish job, but it's not perfect and it can be better, now that is the time for job crafting, because if, let's say, we could trade this one task that's draining the life out of us, let's say with someone who happens to like this sort of thing, and take something from their plate they don't like and we do, and that literally happens. I see it. People do it and it works.
It really works.
That is what's going to make both the people happy and organization much more productive. You can also ask to refocus somewhere. So I'm very entrepreneurial. So I like creating things within the organization and creating new directions or programs or approaches that haven't been done in my organization. And then I just go and create something. And that's really fun. So sometimes you can just entrepreneurially create something that's going to be just maybe not ideal, but 90% ideal is good. So doing that sort of thing can definitely help. Or just again, trading tasks and asking, can I get, let's say, development in this particular area? Just trying to chart your own growth and your own development. That can definitely work. You do again need organization that at least has semi inclusive and understanding culture to do that.
Hey you, I'm Andrew Seaman. Do you want a new job? Or do you want to move forward in your career? Well, you should listen to my weekly show called Get Hired with Andrew Seaman. We talk about it all, and it's waiting for you, yes you, wherever you get your podcasts.
Small and medium businesses don't have time to waste, and neither do marketers trying to reach them. On LinkedIn, more SMB decision makers are actively looking for new solutions to help them grow, whether it's software or financial services. Our Meet the SMB report breaks down how these businesses buy and what really influences their choices. Learn more at linkedin.com/meet-the-SMB. That's linkedin.com/meet-the-SMB.
You mentioned something at the end, which I just want to highlight for listeners, which is that, as equal as identifying how you can apply more of your strengths is also being able to ask for help or support or a swap on the things that you're never going to be good at. And that's okay. The leaders that I have studied who have managed to make all this work are equally good at delegating or asking for help or getting rid of things that weigh them down as they are as doing more with their strengths. It's that sort of both sides of the equation. But in order to do that, you have to sort of accept that you need help. And that's hard for a lot of us to do as well.
even though we all do need help.
We all need help. I want to talk about the physical environment of the office for a little bit.
Mhm.
My listeners know all this. We don't need to tell them that flexibility works and the office doesn't fit for everyone. I know y'all know it. One of the stories that you talk about that's so moving is an executive named Caroline Stokes, and she has ADHD, big leader, big job, who would just work all day and all night to be excellent. But then something happened and she realized she didn't need to work all day and all night. Can you tell us that story a little bit?
Yes. Uh, Caroline is just a wonderful, wonderful person. And she started working for big companies, Virgin, Sony, and obviously as a young career person, she wanted to show how what a good contributor she was, which she was, and she did the work. But people thought she was, overachiever, and they base it on the fact that she always stayed after work and put in extra hours. What they didn't realize, she had to put in all those extra hours because she couldn't get anything done during the work hours because of all the, commotion and water cooler conversations and the general, office life happening. So she had to then come in on the weekends and do the work at night because she couldn't concentrate and couldn't do her best job. Then she discovered, and that was obviously before any kind of the modern types of flexibility, but then she discovered that she could work from home. And when she ended up taking a break to have a child, but she still tried to work and ended up doing a lot for herself from home. And then she figured out that she can be very productive. The problem was the office. It was the commotion in the office, and by herself, she could do so much more. And that was also way, way before she was officially diagnosed with ADHD. And that also was first, okay, well, that's me, that's my brain, and I just need to work around it before you actually get a label on it, as many of us in that generation experienced.
Yeah.
We just kind of try to work around our brain, and then we find out that our brain kind of feeds into particular style of brains.
I know. And listen, I mean, I have so many clients who, because of meetings, because of Slack, they just have given up doing any work during the day. But then what ends up happening, right? It spills over. It
Mhm.
spills over.
We work weekends, and I've been there too.
Yeah. I love to work on the weekend personally. I do my best work off cycle because I'm not interrupted.
Mhm.
I don't have to worry. You have a phrase in your book from someone, the sensory nightmare of the office.
Yes.
What would a neuro-inclusive office space look like, feel like, sound like? And how can listeners who may not have a gazillion-dollar budget to redesign like Deloitte does, how can they think of making small changes?
Yes. And again, flexibility is something that is the key
Yeah.
because there is no ideal office that works for everyone. So the way I would design it is a very minimalistic blank slate. So let's say if it's adding to the environment, think about it. So let's say usually human brains needs light to function. So let's say as much natural light as possible. Unless people are dealing with glare, then you'll figure out how to remove the glare. Most humans need a little bit of their own space. We are not comfortable packed like sardines. We're not comfortable with our backs exposed because for many of us, it's just kind of the instinct to always be
It triggers anxiety.
monitoring.
It's a sensory
Yeah,
anxiety.
it's a sensory anxiety, and I don't even get into people who experience trauma because that would be
Mhm.
heightened. So let's say if you have PTSD, that's going to be even more significant. So give people space, give people the basic physical safety where they don't feel like they have to monitor their environment all the time. Then, when it comes to bells and whistles and specifics, give people as much flexibility as you can because if you decide, okay, everyone enjoys a little bit of music, that's not true. So just let people listen to their headphones and do whatever they want. And if they don't want to hear anything, don't force them to hear anything, because once you're overstimulated, it's very hard to calm down. And if someone, let's say, needs a pop of bright color, just let them bring their own bright whatever, pillow or calendar, something that will make them happy, as long as they're not forcing it on other people. Then some people will need more light, less light, and some people prefer artificial lighting. Other people really just don't like artificial lighting. Allow for flexibility for those things. It doesn't have to be expensive. And finally, flexibility. Why does everyone have to work from the office? Period. So we can all maybe deal with the office if we're dealing with it maybe twice a week. But just think, do we need more? We can come and socialize and have meetings and have a good office time and then do our focused work at home. That might be another option. If you don't have a lot of money to create beautiful offices and then beautiful additional rooms where people can go for meetings, then you could trade it off for just giving people more time flexibility to work on those focus projects. Or you could schedule it in a way that at the very least you don't have brainstorming and focused work happening in the same time and in the same space. Because I think many people are annoyed with offices when it's not just the open office, but their office neighbor is on Teams the entire day presenting and participating in meetings.
I mean, you hear that with the return to office. I think one of the big things that's happening at Amazon that people are so pissed off about is that they have this mandate, but a lot of the office, I don't know if it's Amazon, one of the big companies, there's not enough space for everyone. And so now it's
Yes.
crowded. There aren't plugs. There aren't, one of the things that I was chuckling to myself as I was reading is that you cite a JP Morgan study about the productivity of neurodivergent workers. And JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon caused quite a kerfuffle at a recent employee town hall when he basically just started slagging off employees who don't want to come to the office 5 days a week. You know that the guys in charge, most of them just want butts in seats. They don't care about your needs. It's a tough environment for a lot of us to ask for what we need. What's going to happen?
And that is a huge question. Now, if we are talking about neurodivergent people, it kind of throws us back where we have been. Let's say in the 90s and, 2015, when it was just do what everyone else does, and I don't care if you can do your work
And suffer.
remotely.
Yeah.
What's interesting with JP Morgan, they do have a wonderful research on their autism program, but all of those were in-office jobs. They did create pretty good sensory environment at the time. They provided more or less probably friendly environment, but we learned so much from when this work started before the pandemic. We should be learning and improving, not going back. But for some people, there is this one model of how things work that they learned when they were when they were just learning how to do corporate. Sometimes it's very hard to move away from that model, and it becomes such an ingrained part of what you do that you believe, maybe sometimes honestly believe, that this is just better for organization or this is just how things are done. And there are many other organizations, smaller organizations, maybe less known, that have been flexible and inclusive for a very long time without even necessarily making noise. It's definitely harder when you're a big organization. You made big vocal commitment to something. It's very hard to go back on it. But personalities aside, if organizations really looked at their data and just approached it from a just very scientific perspective, not because they want to be good, but just because they want to conduct an experiment. Let's say bring people back and let's look at the basic moral indicators, health, and so forth, and then allow people more flexibility and record the data. Big companies can do it pretty easily. And what I think is missing even from those considerations, just give people different options. Allow extroverts work the way extroverts work. Allow introverts work the way introverts work and collect the data. And I will bet you that if you conduct this kind of non-lab experience, because we know from the lab that extroverts do better when they have extrovert feeding environments with more stimulation. Introverts work better with less stimulation. But if you want to repeat that within your organization and not in the lab, try it. Give introverts and extroverts different options and see how much outcome they will produce. And you will probably be very pleased with the outcomes when people are working with their strengths and with their personal styles. And again, it's not extroverts and introverts. There are many different, obviously, variables. So if you really, really, really want to be informed, don't just pull, okay, the study of data entry from India everyone is citing. I'm sorry, the study of data entry workers from India is not going to inform how people in Boston and California doing jobs that are not entry level are going to be able to perform. And especially when you also not just align it with just our organization, but individual level differences, you are just going to see a lot more productivity. And look into available statistics as well. Was a large scale study in Denmark that shows that illness and sickness absence goes way up with open offices, for example.
Well, that's like, duh. Of course, it's like,
So it just doesn't make sense. So now, like, they're putting those people, they don't have desks, they're stressed out, they have to fight for desks, they have to fight for parking, and then they're also giving each other all those bugs. And
it
it
just,
doesn't make any sense. It just won't produce best productivity. And then, of course, what do you think your best workers are going to do? They're going to try to get out because if they can't work in an environment that fits them, then you are going to lose your most productive people. It doesn't make sense. I hope people will just decide to say, okay, let's just be objective here, do research, do study, and then maybe adjust it. And JP Morgan of all organizations do know how to do internal research. So they should be able to just do it empirically and thoughtfully.
they won't. They'll do what organizations always do, which is that it'll happen at the manager level, and some managers will be like, I won't
Mhm.
tell, do what you need to do, and some won't, and it'll just be life as usual, you know?
Yeah.
I want to finish with one more question, but I just wanted to actually ask you a quick question, which is that have you ever seen any data around lost productivity tied to burnout from masking, from all the nonsense that we've just been talking about? I'm sure that's really hard to quantify. I know that we have lots of data on how much burnout costs in terms of lost productivity, but I would have to imagine that for all the people we're discussing who haven't formally disclosed, because most people don't formally disclose if they're high performing,
Right.
they're suffering and they're going to get burnt out.
I have not seen data on organizational productivity because I don't know if that has been done. It might have been.
Yeah.
On the individual level, people definitely report lower productivity, higher depression, more fatigue, and worse health as outcomes of masking. So all of those things, obviously, even if we try our best and we're burning ourselves out and all we do is work and go to bed, eventually it will show in organizational productivity. See, but what most of us do that's a typical employment situation is we are in effect protecting organizations from consequences of treating us badly because most of us are going to keep working and just sleeping less and resting less and just still trying to produce until we're just completely burned out or we get sick, like to the point of where we get sick. And then organizations can feel the consequences. So the individual is most likely to feel the consequences. And then the organization.
Well, they're going to feel it in their incredibly high health claims. Most organizations, mental health is their single biggest cost driver when it
Yes.
comes to healthcare.
Yes. So before it will show in productivity, that's where it will show, because people will try to go to a doctor. They'll try to say, is there some pill that will help me perform better? Even though what you really need is just poor neuroaffirming work environment. Yeah, so it will show in your healthcare costs before it will show in productivity. That's it for this episode of The Anxious Achiever. The show is produced and edited by Mary Dew, with production support and sound engineering by Nick Krinko. If you like what you heard, head to your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review. It really matters, and we appreciate the time and effort it takes. And if you don't subscribe or follow the show already, now's the time. And let us know what you'd like to hear more of. I get some of my best ideas from my listeners, so find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. You can find my weekly newsletter there as well. A big thanks to LinkedIn and all the listeners out there and our guests in the Anxious Achiever world. Until next time.